I suppose what I wanted to talk today about is scooters. And in the interest of full disclosure, I should say that I own a scooter and I love my e-scooter. It's really, really handy. As somebody like me in Dublin 1 and 7, my constituency of Dublin Central is very populous but fairly compact. And for people who live somewhere like me, a scooter is a game changer. You can get around the city quickly, easily. And I think something that we don't talk about enough maybe is the affordability of it as a means of transport. So for so many people around me, it's something that's within their means. For students, for carers, they can go much further distances without relying on bus schedules or the Lewis. They can really take their own transport into their own hands. And that is hugely important. It's hugely important for people on low incomes. So I'm incredibly supportive of legislating for e-scooters. I think it's very important. But I'm also the parent of a child who uses a white cane and who is registered as blind and who is also hard of hearing and has dyspraxia, which means that the street is always difficult for her, and which also means that we're constantly in contact with the National Council for the Blind, who do incredible work and who we certainly rely on for services. During the course of this bill, I have been in contact with the NCBI, who have talked me through some of their recommendations on this bill in conjunction with the Irish Wheelchair Association and the Irish Guide Dogs for the Blind. Before I go through some of the recommendations that they made to me, I want to talk a little bit about some of the principles for what makes a good street for someone like my 9-year-old, who finds it pretty difficult, who can't see pavements always, can't see obstructions, also can't hear cars coming. The first principle would be the hierarchy of the street. This is referred to some degree in our design manual on urban streets and roads. And the hierarchy of the street is as follows. The most important person on a street is a vulnerable pedestrian. Not just a pedestrian, but a vulnerable pedestrian. Somebody who might have mobility issues, who might be older and find it difficult to walk long distances, somebody who might find it difficult to cross in the time that the pedestrian crossing gives them, somebody who might not see a curb. The second is just your average pedestrian. The third is cyclists and self-propelled vehicles. The fourth is public transport. The fifth, private rented transport. The sixth, local business deliveries. Seventh, local motor traffic. Eighth, non-local motor traffic, and so on. The hierarchy of the street sets out who the street must service first. And it is absolutely true that if a space is designed for the most vulnerable amongst us, it will be a usable space for everybody. All footpaths, streets, squares and developments, and all decisions around transport should be designed with universality of access in mind. So on that point, first and foremost, and one of the most important things that the NCBI, the Irish Wheelchair Association, the Irish Guide Dogs for the Blind raised with me is the need to keep footpaths safe. I have to say, during this debate, and I've been watching it closely, I've heard a lot about scooters whizzing past people and the idea that there might be collisions. And I'll be honest, we've never had that. We've never actually had a collision between my child and a bike, or my child and a child on a scooter. We've actually been pretty lucky. That doesn't necessarily solve the issue, because a bike or a scooter on a footpath doesn't have to hit you to rob you of your confidence. If a cyclist or somebody on an e-scooter whizzes past you, you can feel the air change around you, you can hear the noise, you can feel something coming at you, and it robs you. It robs you of your access to that public space. It makes you feel like you're not safe and you're more likely to stay at home. And we know that that's what people with vision impairment do. They stay at home because they feel that they're not safe. We need to ensure that this legislation has robust and clear language around the safeguarding of footpaths and the keeping of footpaths safe and clear of motorised vehicles and e-scooters. The second, I think, which is one of the more important ones for me, is the alert for vehicle acoustic systems. Now, this is a conversation that we would have had around electric cars, and it's incredibly important, and I know that people with visual impairment face this challenge across the world. Electric vehicles of all sorts are relatively quiet, and in some ways that's fantastic, because for anybody like me who lives in inner city Dublin, you're used to the hum of the city, but certainly not the roar of traffic. That's not what we want. We want our communities to have a reasonable level of noise and not noise pollution. So the idea that we would have less noise, less sound, is absolutely appropriate and good, and certainly, again, for somebody who's experiencing sensory processing disorder or autism, that is a huge boon. However, we do also need to be able to hear cars and vehicles, and particularly e-scooters, coming. So the idea that there will be some provision within the legislation for vehicular acoustic systems is advisable and is a good idea. I think under advisement or for consideration should be the speed limit. I know that other countries have a slightly different speed limit. They don't necessarily go with the 20 kilometres per hour, sometimes it's 15. Now look, I totally accept that we should be advised by the experts on that, but I do have to say an e-scooter whizzing past you at 15 kilometres and 20 kilometres an hour are two hugely different things, and that should be under advisement. Thirdly, I think that, you know, sometimes we don't always get transport right, but one very important thing that we did get right in the last few years, and I know my colleague Kieran Cuff did a lot of work on this, but when we introduced bleeper bikes in Dublin, the requirement for bleeper bikes was that they would have somewhere for them to park. Now, an issue that has come up over and over and over again on the e-scooters globally is that where you get private providers of shared e-scooters, they get dumped on footpaths, they get left everywhere. As I said, I'm hugely supportive of this, and I have to say the shared schemes of these are even better, because people don't even have to lay out the 200 or 300 euro for the scooter themselves. They can simply sign up to the scheme. That's fantastic. But like the bleeper bikes, we need to ensure that where those private providers move into an urban area or a suburban area or even a rural area, that there is suitable parking provided so that they are not strewn across footpaths and provide an obstruction. In a city where we already have parking obstructions from people parking on footpaths with their cars, bins often strewn across the path, and particularly at this time of year, leaves are a major issue. I feel it's really important to say that we shouldn't be adding to that problem by allowing people to park their scooters anywhere and everywhere. Fourthly, I want to call out the issue of shared space. Now, I'm not sure how viable or how possible it is to consider geofencing and reducing the access of e-scooters to shared spaces, but I would make a call that, you know, it still is included in the DMIRS document, but shared space is incredibly difficult for people with vision impairment. It's almost impossible. People with vision impairment need curbs. We need protected space. It's the exact same principle as cycling on a road. You need to be protected. You can't necessarily see what's coming up against you. Shared space simply does not work, and we should be looking to remove it from all of our local authority design guidelines, from DMIRS and any other design guidelines that are in place or are legislatively accounted for. There should be no more shared space, and certainly we shouldn't see it coming into design models. And I have to say, I have seen this in the last year and a half, bodies like the NTA suggesting shared space around transport nodes, and it is really worrying. It shouldn't be something that we're continuing to design for. So I suppose I want to finish by saying that I'm hugely supportive of e-scooters. I'm an e-scooter owner and user, and they are a game changer. But we all have to share our public space and our public realm, and some of us are motorists, and some of us are cyclists, and some of us use skateboards, and some of us will use e-scooters. But every single person in Ireland, in some sense, 100% of the people in Ireland are pedestrians at some stage. And I think we need to work to represent a really inclusive, ambitious way to deliver a public realm that is accessible and walkable and supportive of every single vulnerable pedestrian out there.